Welcome to another episode of the Dog on It Trucking Podcast. I have Miss Desiree Wood from Real Women in Trucking joining us this week. Desiree, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's awesome. As you know, I don't want to say a mutual friend, but I attended a 3-day conference. And when somebody found out what I do for a living, they said, "You got to have Desiree on your show." So I reached out and you were kind enough to say yes. So awesome. Tell me about Real Women in Trucking and the organization.
Okay, well, we are a 501c6 organization. We were formed by working women truck drivers. We've been around now for 11 years, and we primarily started to have an advocacy for truck drivers, specifically women truck drivers, and very focused on the training, very focused on the training system, and also the sexual assaults that we came to be aware were happening at a number of fleets.
And that scares me. I too, by the way, the sexual assaults scare me, just to complete that thought. I too work quite a bit with training. I used to be PTDI. I'm sure you're familiar with PTDI, Professional Truck Driver Institute, has recently merged or amalgamated or got bought. I'm not sure exactly what happened. But I used to be the auditor for PTDI, and I used to travel around North America going to the truck driving schools and doing audits for them. So I'm quite familiar with truck driving and the schools and the training. It does scare me, though. I have to say, I always thought about being a male driver with a female student alone in a truck. Not overnight, but I'm just talking about the truck driver training part. That always concerned me because it could easily be alleged about sexual assault.
There's really a lack of training and preparation. I think with the PTDI, you're talking more about the preliminary schools,
right?
That get the person their CDL, and then they go off to one of these finishing carriers. So at the CDL school itself, we've had a few complaints, something like an instructor telling a woman she's got to give him a lap dance for her to get past the test, stuff like that. But when they go off to the finishing schools, which are pretty large fleets, often they have the student and the trainer on the truck for about 35 to 45 days, depending on how long it takes, and they're alone. So it's bunk beds in there, and they leave the property and are on a load, often team miles. So you're talking about a student who's pretty much just finished a few weeks of instruction and believes that they're going to a company that's going to give them in-depth training one-on-one now. Because let's be honest, these CDL schools are just a few weeks, and you're just getting really the basics. You're basically going to go to these companies where you just are hopefully able to go around the block and not hit curbs, but you don't have a lot more skill on really being out there. So when you get with your trainer, you're operating under the belief system that this is it. This is the training. And then a lot of times women who are not part of an established team find they're in a situation, somebody who's going to take advantage. We've had everything from women being told they couldn't take a shower on their own. They had to take a shower with the trainer. That sometimes the trainer will have them get on the bottom bunk, and then they'll get in bed with them, or all kinds of horrific stories, even to being held in the truck, assaulted repeatedly, violently. And so these things have been going on for years, and nobody wanted to be outspoken. So we formed really for that, but now we have been outspoken on some other topics as well. But this particular issue, the assault, is really a side effect of over recruiting when they don't have enough trainers to go around for the people they're recruiting. And so a lot of times the trainers are coerced into train, really not doing it because they have a love of teaching. They're doing it because they told them they were going to make a little bit more money, and they thought that they were going to be making more money. And so there's a little resentment there, and there's just not a lot of profession.
Can can you tell me some? So there's some awful stories that you've heard, and that's the main reason you formed. How about some good stories?
Mhm.
Um, because I know of one company up here in Canada where if they can't get a female trainer to go with a female student, then if it is male, then the female stays in a hotel room overnight so that they're not staying in
That
the same area.
Yeah, that's a good model. I like that model. There are companies that do it the right way. Um, and that's one of them. If you're gonna have to have and it's not just men and women. Women, we have a video of a woman assaulting another woman. We've had phone calls about one woman chasing another woman down the street with a knife. But again, it's companies that are over recruiting and they don't have good trainers. But the model that you talk about, where they have the student either staying in the motel or the trainer staying in the motel, so the student can see what it's like to sleep in the truck at night. Let me turn that off. Oh, my phone. So that gives them a little bit of time to have apart from each other, because it's a really odd, awkward situation. First of all, you're learning how to operate this really big piece of equipment, and you're living in it, and it's not got a lot of privacy, and you're with a total stranger. I mean, it's awkward even for somebody that's very comfortable in their own skin, to be in this really small space with somebody you've never met, and like, you've got to sleep, undress, wake up, do the things that you do right when you wake up in the morning. It's just a strange situation. So there are some smaller companies that limit how many new students they bring in. They do not hire more than they have trainers for. It's really not a woman trainer thing. I mean, I've heard this before, and there was a big case regarding this same gender training. Um, the company lost. There's not a lot of women trainers because women are hard to train. And when you're an older woman and you have gone through all this stuff and made a life or career for yourself, it's kind of hard to go back and take this responsibility of bringing another woman in when they're not really fully prepared to come in. Like, great male trainers there are. You can learn a lot from some of the male trainers out there, but it is a risky thing to do, train some of these students when they haven't been fully prepared. So it's really important for the company to manage this better, to have, you got one good trainer, let them finish with a student completely, have a break. But oftentimes in some of these big fleets, we see them 100 new people every Monday, and that's just and they don't have the trainers for it, so they're using whoever, somebody that's just been driving. I've met trainers who've only been driving themselves 3 or 4 months, and they're training someone else.
Now, you have your CDL, correct?
Yes.
Have you ever done training?
Yes. I did not. I did started driving in 2007, and I started driving, and I did team driving. This is how I came to know of this problem. I had all of these situations myself. I wasn't sexually assaulted, but I was um, left out in the desert by somebody who was harassing me, and we got into it. And I mean, I had all kinds of situations. When it came time to when they one of the girls I was driving with towards the end, she was going to be a trainer. She took me in the office to and told them, she would be a really good trainer. But by that time, they didn't want me to be a trainer because I had filed a report about two men, and they saw me as a problem because I reported somebody. Because that's the kind of thing that goes on, is if you report the man, then you are a troublemaker. So they don't want you, they want to run you out of there. I ended up being with that company for almost 4 years. I didn't leave. I went on the Walmart dedicated account, and I was actually interviewed by Dan Rather in an episode called Queen of the Road, which is on my YouTube channel. And I'm in that company truck. When I left there on good terms. But at the time, they didn't, they, they tried to keep me moving, because if I wasn't moving, I was writing on my blog or doing advocacy, but I wasn't doing anything wrong, so they couldn't fire me. But they didn't like me around because they saw me as a person that would, I guess, give them knowledge or, some sort of troublemaker.
Well, you were pointing out the flaws of the system. So does that
Yeah,
bring us to, I mean, that's kind of the basis of why Real Women in Trucking was started.
yeah,
And
yeah, it was.
did you start it?
Yes, I did.
What?
Yeah. Myself and some other women drivers, but I'm the one that filed the paperwork. And of it today, we are in partnership with two other groups that have a number of drivers in their um, groups, but we have our IRS determination letter, and those are the LGBTQ drivers. Shelly Litchie is in charge of that group, and She Trucking Sisterhood that Sheree Moore created, and it's a really large group. In fact, I think they're filming with CNN this week, and they really have a large group of new drivers, diverse young women who have gravitated towards Sheree's brand. She had created a brand called She Trucking. And so when she's got, mostly they help each other out, they mentor each other with, what's going on in the recent stuff with all these different companies. But if there's something very difficult going on, then they call me, they'll tag me and say, can you help us with this? So we try to all help each other out. We're all drivers. Um, One of our board members has been a driver for 50 years.
Well, when did you start driving? Sorry,
2007. 2007.
well, you've got a ton of experience.
Yeah, I've done over the road, I've done team driving, winter driving, mountain driving, I've pulled the mail, I've done plants, I've unloaded the plants, I've loaded trailers with a double loader, I've done food, I've operated a lift gate, dairy, um, all kinds of different things.
Now, right now, you're not on the road, and that's because you are
Mhm.
doing some work or putting together a brief, I guess it is, for FMCSA. You're involved in some court cases. Talk about that for a bit.
Mhm. Well, I came out to the West Coast at the beginning of the pandemic to consult on a movie and to be an expert witness on a rape case in California. I put my stuff in storage because I was going to be out here for 3 months, and then the pandemic happened, and I was going to be out here longer, so I rented this apartment. But the court cases are getting ready to resume, and then I've picked up some other court cases, pregnancy discrimination, the rape case, another accident case that came up. But also, we just got granted a meeting with the FMCSA with the new administration, and we're really grateful because they just started getting situated there, and we got a meeting right away so that we can let them know the difference. And we're very grateful. We had a meeting with them in November of 2019 about the sexual misconduct. We had presented a petition with over 10,000 signatures to them at the Great American Truck Show, asking them to take immediate action. That led to a meeting in November 2019, but because of all the turmoil in the country, we haven't been able to get a follow-up until now. So we're very excited about that. We just formed a partnership with RAIN, the Rape and Incest National Network in Washington, D.C.,
Okay.
so that we can start having a hotline for women that are in distress. And we hope that we can do it with our other partner groups to get that widget on their websites as well. So it's a little easier for drivers who have been affected. We also have a new organization we formed this year called Truckers Emergency Assistance Responders. TEAR is the acronym. And so during the pandemic, we were very active passing out PPE to drivers, masks, gloves, antiseptic hand antiseptic and stuff like that. So there's been a lot going on when I'm not on the road, to keep
Well,
us busy. And I got appointed to the MIXAC committee,
okay.
the Motor
You're
Carrier Safety.
okay. I was going to say you're talking to a Canadian, so explain that acronym.
Yeah. Well, it's a. I mean, I well, we haven't heard a whole lot more about it. I was encouraged to put in a resume for this subcommittee for call a motor carrier safety advisory subcommittee. It's a subcommittee, it's under another committee. They wanted just drivers on it, and somebody called me and said, would you put your resume in? And I said, I feel like a lot of these committees are paper tiger for show, and they don't really get anything done. But they said, well, you should try. And I said, all right, I'll do it. And they wrote me a letter recommendation, and I got appointed to it. We haven't heard anything more about it since the appointment press release came out, but we are always hopeful that we can get something positive done for the drivers.
It's things do need to change for truck driving. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a tough go. During the pandemic, it's made it even tougher. But spending days or weeks on the road at a time away from your family, I really believe that we're on the verge of making some positive changes. But and I'm glad that people like you have stepped up to help one of the segments, particularly in this case, women in trucking. But just to round out, I got two more questions. TIER, I forget the acronym already, but that was, I assume, was for both men and women.
Yes. Yeah, and that came about, two other things that we've been very active in is truck parking, Jason's Law truck parking, and wage theft, driver misclassification. And sometimes with the women and with the men, they find themselves working for somebody that just leaves them, they just come and take the truck and tow it away. They've had maybe an argument on the phone or something, and all different sorts of situations. We had an older gentleman who um, there was an accident, no fault of his own. They came and towed his truck away, but he got injured in it. But his boss brought him another truck to drive, but didn't want him to go to the hospital. So he was starting to have issues, and he felt like he was having some internal bleeding. And when he told the guy, I really need to go to the hospital, I got to have a few days off, the guy just came and told him, get all your stuff out of the truck, you're fired, and left him. So when he got a hold of us, he had some doctor's appointments he really needed to go to. And so we helped him get a place to stay for a month, so that he could stay there, and then he could figure out another situation. He didn't have a home to go to. We've had women, a young gal a couple months ago that was pregnant, kicked out of her truck after an argument with her dispatcher. In the middle of the night, they came and took her truck from her, left her with her cat, her and her cat. These are things you shouldn't have to deal with this at your job, but this is the kind of job where you go far from home. And there are situations, maybe the truck breaks down and the boss doesn't want to fix the truck, and you got to figure out how to get home. And that's not always something that is for sure that they're going to do for you. So that's why TIER was formed. We had been doing it out of our own pockets for years, but TIER's a 501c3 charity, and we just formed in the end of 2019. So when the pandemic happened, we wrote about some of the difficulties drivers were experiencing on the road. No masks, not being able to use the bathroom, no food services, all of these things. And we got a really generous donation for PPE, and not just to make our own PPE packs, but also from Uber Freight. They made a custom one that they sent to us. So the donation came from a back office company called DDC FPO. Probably nobody's ever heard of them unless you know of back office, but they really helped us out to make it possible for us to distribute all of these packs of over 10,000, probably about 12,000, 13,000 packs to truck drivers in the early days of the pandemic. So it was nice to be able to do that and let drivers know that there are people that care about them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're involved, deeply involved, it sounds like, in two great organizations, Real Women in Trucking and TIER. And should
Yeah.
women want to join Real Women in Trucking, the link to get a hold of you is in the show notes below. And the TIER information, you'll send me that so that I can include that in the show notes below as well.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah. Or they can go I don't, I'll have to do it afterwards, I assume, or I don't see show notes anywhere. But on our website, realwomenintrucking.org, it says support, and there's a membership link there. If somebody wants to donate to TIER, they could go to cdltear.org, and they can make a tax deductible donation. And one other event that we have coming up is our 5th annual Queen of the Road Awards. You do
There
not
you
have to be a
go.
member, and it is the first dignified award for women truckers. We had it in Las Vegas last year, and we're having it in Las Vegas again this year. So if there's somebody out there watching that knows a way to be nominated, the nominations are going to open in March, and the winners will be announced. The event will be held in August in Las Vegas.
Cool. And I can include a link to that to the nomination in the show notes below as well, if you send that to me.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
perfect. What else, as we wrap up, what other words would you like to say to our listeners?
Well, I mean, it sounds like your listeners are focused on safety, and they should realize that um, the preliminary training is one part that these drivers are getting, but once they go off to these mega fleets, a lot of them just fall through the cracks, especially women. And sometimes it's from just lack of preparation. Um, I recently had a dispatcher call me because he hired a woman who has 5 years of experience driving, but she's never gone over the road, and he didn't know how to advise her. He called me up, and I've been talking to her on the phone, and sure enough, somebody tried to get into her truck on her first night staying at a truck stop. It's good for a woman to know somebody else when they go out there, just to show them the ropes. This is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. This is where you should park. This is how to go about this thing. So you can help them network with women who know and will look out for them. And that's what we're trying to do is, we can't wait for the industry to raise their standards. We're just sort of trying to help each other out.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in some companies at least, they need to raise their standards. There are some very
They
good
do.
ones, but there's others out there I know, and it happens to men too. It, as much as you are focused on the women problem, and it is a real problem, and there's added things, as you already mentioned, rape and abuse that largely happen more often to women, although it does happen to men from time to time. But as an industry, we haven't treated drivers real well. It doesn't matter if they're
Right.
male or female, at least some companies. I really hope most of the companies are different, but I hear so many stories that
It's a very convoluted, that's part of the problem is, somebody can go on and tell you they're the greatest company, but when then you talk to the drivers and you hear a completely different story. But they have all the nice ads and they have all the things that on the surface make them look like they're wonderful. So it makes it hard to find that needle in the haystack of that one good company where you want to stay.
yeah, no, it's. I was fortunate. I worked as a driver for a good company, and um, it was the only company I ever drove at. And then I got promoted a few times, and eventually left the driving part of it behind. But it was I was fortunate. I worked for a good company, and I got paid. I made my miles, and never missed a paycheck. That type of thing. And they respected drivers. I really have to say my experience is totally opposite from what I hear, not just you, but many other people say. And it takes some. Unfortunately, it takes them sometimes 3 or 4 companies before they find one that they go, oh my God, here's one that treats me the way I wish to
Yeah,
be treated.
right.
Okay. So, last word. What would you like to say?
Well, I hope people will, take some time to know the difference. That's our tagline, and support us in this mission to try to get some awareness of this sexual misconduct. This industry needs to, have a wake up call and stop enabling some of these bad fleets. It's going to help all of us to clean this up.
Well, it's going to take all of us. And yeah, it's a shame that we have to talk about this. I had a rep on from TAT, Truckers Against Trafficking, on the show
Yeah,
as
I
well.
helped them get into social media.
So
I
it's a
was one of the
shame.
first drivers to learn about them.
It's just a shame that we need groups like yours and like TAT.
Mhm.
Um, however, we
Yeah,
do. So for
yeah,
anybody that's interested, the link to joining or making a contribution to Real Women in Trucking is in the show notes below. If you have a woman that you would like to nominate for, what was the name
it's
again?
called Queen of the Road Awards.
The Queen of the Road Awards. I'll have a link for that in the show notes below. And then lastly, we'll put a link in there for TIER so that if people would like to make a donation to help trucking out during this pandemic, and I guess it's not just during the pandemic, it's for anybody who gets stranded or, let me say it the way it comes out, screwed over by somebody
Yeah.
and needs the help. TIER is also there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Desiree, thank you so much for coming on the
You're
show.
welcome.
I appreciate it. I hope you loved the show as much as I did. Please leave us a like, a thumbs up, a review, a comment, a rating if it is in your heart. Thank you so much. And I do really appreciate your time. And join us again next week for another exciting interview.